Thank you. I would like first to express my gratitude to the Institute, the organizers of this conference, and to all the participants. I would also like to express my gratitude to Professor Vasiljevic, who expressed an optimism for the possibility, concerning the possibility of Serbian accession to the European Union. We used to be very optimistic long ago, but since it was long ago, now a little bit that optimism faded away. So, okay, but still I'm coming from a candidate country, and as you probably are aware of, I will remind you, until the year 2000, nobody in Serbia thought of it. We were in a series of war situation, we were under sanctions, etc., etc. So after the change of the regime in October, the 1st of October 2000, then the idea of possible accession of, at that time, Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, then Serbia, to the European Union appeared and turned into kind of even Euromania and Europhoria. Yeah. Okay. So I remember it was on the 20th of July. I think it was 2004. There was a vice prime minister, a young guy, a little bit foolish, but still, if he was a prime minister, vice prime minister, he organized a performance on the 20th of July, 2004. And 20th of July is 2020, July 07, so it makes 2007. Because at that time, they believed that Serbia will become a member of the European Union in 2007. It was completely unrealistic. It was the year of Romanian and Bulgarian entry. But at that time in Serbia, people, and not anybody, vice prime minister, believed that we will be a member state. Meanwhile, we passed through procedure. I won't bother you, it is a little bit too technical, and practically everybody knows what is happening when you are a candidate. So I could just mention the negotiation for a stabilization and association agreement were launched in 2005. Exactly the 1st of October, 5 years after the coup in Belgrade. So we have our agreement is called Stabilization and Association Agreement. Since we are problematic, the Western Balkans, so we have to stabilize ourselves before we associate, so get associated to the European Union. So there is Stabilization and Association Agreement. Then, in 2008, on the 1st of January, agreement on the visa facilitation and readmission entered into force. Then there is, I'm skipping from the timetables, on the end of April 2008, that Stabilization Association Agreement, an interim agreement on trade and trade-related issues were signed in Luxembourg. And we waited for a long time until the entry into force of the Stabilization and Association Agreement, and even the interim agreement, which concerned only the trade issues, because those are competencies and even exclusive competencies of the Union. So we could practically, it did not need the ratification of by the member states, so it was started being applied, and even Serbia started applying it earlier, before the Union. So we were so willing to do everything at our in our possibilities just to get as close as possible. Then there was on the 1st of March 2012, Serbia became a candidate country. Then in September 2013, the EU-Serbia Stabilization Association Agreement entered into force, so 5 years later. And we have even, it was already mentioned that there are neighboring country, we can expect some perhaps possible obstacles from some neighboring countries. One of the candidates for some obstacles for us is Croatia, isn't it? So because there are unsolved issues, there is, for instance, for some elements of this approach, there was also Romania, which put some obstacles because of a minority, some that we call Vlach. They consider them Romanian. And then there is, and for instance, for this Stabilization and Association Agreement, the last one which ratified was Lithuania. Nobody would expect Lithuania to be there, far from us, a small country without any big ambitions to terrorize somebody, but still, the reasons were there were some investments in possible investments in Serbia that failed, and that was the reason for their being unsatisfied. And there is another reason: they had a candidate for the president of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and we had a candidate. And it was our candidate who was elected. So that was one of the reasons for that delay. So anything can happen on that path, but I'm just mentioning that unexpected obstacle. So we have we've been opening chapter by chapter. We started negotiations, opening chapter by chapter, doing the harmonization of legislations, etc. And the methodology was changed, revised in 2020. Sorry, it was now those chapters. There are 35 chapters. They are concentrated into clusters. It doesn't change much, in fact, but it is a little bit technical change. So now. There are 25 out of 35 chapters that have been opened, and including all chapters under Cluster 1 on the fundamentals of the process and Cluster 4 of Green Agenda. So I won't bother you because it is a boring thing to speak about all those issues. It is too technical. I would like, since we are speaking about the title is The Dilemmas of Geographical Enlargement. I will speak about the dilemmas of ourselves, or how do we see now, after all these long years of waiting for something, and after the hopes that have faded away, as I said, to a great extent. I think that the percentage in the beginning of the millennium were of those who were for the accession of Serbia into the European Union was about 80% or even more. It depends, because those who make those surveys, they very often adapt that to their expectations and to their agenda. And now it was reduced to about 40 or a little bit more, a little bit less percent of those who believe that we should. It's not genuine disbelief, in fact, in those 60% that we should not, but rather they don't want us, so who cares? Okay, so that is something. So, okay, and let's see a little bit about other possibilities, or where we are, what we can expect, etc. Let's have a little bit of picture of how we think about all these things. Yesterday, there was one of the part of the titles of the parties of the conference were ever closer union and this and that. So this expression, which exists in the preambles of the treaties, ever closer union, which was consists of two parts: ever closer and union. Union is used in the very beginning, for instance, in the Schuman Declaration. He speaks as a ultimate goal of the integration of a future federation, and the Cold Steel community would be the first step towards it. And after that, the word federation disappeared from the documents, and it is the union which is used, which is now official title of the organization. And ever closer, in fact, is the gradual nature of the integration process, which in the Schuman Declaration is expressed by the famous words, Europe won't be created at once by concrete achievements, which will create first de facto solidarity. And that is the process of integration. So European Union, as European integration is a process. So when you enter into something, we have to be aware of the fact that we are entering into a process. And European Union, in fact, is a kind of a running train. So you have to know when you enter into a running train that you are entering a running train. You have to know where the train is bound for, because if you are entering a train, you don't know where it is going, then it's something wrong there is something wrong with you. And you also have to know where it started from and why it started, etc., etc. So all these elements, which could be called the dynamics of the European integration, is something we should be aware of when we think of our possible future in it or even outside of it. Because, well, let's see. This is Serbia, with a little bit complicated structure, because there is a lighter part which is whose status is a little bit complicated for us, the Kosovo part. Okay, we consider it as a part of Serbia. Some consider it as an independent state. Yeah. Okay, so, but we are surrounded, and even those other countries, the Western Balkans, we are surrounded by the European Union. It's quite natural to be a part of that. You cannot, all the figures about the trade, about anything are go in favor of the further approaching and final accession to the European Union. The problem is, we seem not to be wanted there, and especially after when President Macron announced that European Union should pass through reforms itself before thinking of further enlargements, then it's a bit our future became a little bit more precarious. So that's it. Even there is an event, for instance. The Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs wanted to come to Serbia last year, and since he's under sanctions of all the countries around us, his plane could not fly to Belgrade because it was forbidden by everybody. So that is the extent to which we are surrounded by the European Union, or perhaps other states. Montenegro would be one of the possibilities, but they also accepted introduced the sanctions. So that is our position. That is our natural position, and naturally we belong to Europe. We belong culturally. We belong in any possible respect to Europe. We feel so, etc. So that is our natural place. Unfortunately, there are some obstacles of different kinds that are, and we lost hope about. So we started thinking of something else. This is a map. I'm speaking about geographical enlargement. So when you think of geography, there are always maps somewhere around. So there is another map. Okay, so when you look this light gray color, we belong to that. In the same way, Western Balkans or Serbia are a small part of the larger map of Europe, something which is this is the map of the world. So there is not only Europe, there is the whole world. And the world is getting more and more globalized, and more and more there are more and more links on the global scale. When we speak about globalization, usually there is a negative sentiment that it provokes, because there are many abuses of the process of globalization. But the fact that the possibilities of communication, the economic possibilities and things of that sort are becoming global, that the social processes are getting on a global scale, that is something which is natural. That is, which is a law. It is a social law, as well as in the same way as gravity is a natural law. You can do anything against it, but you can prevent and fight against abuses of globalization. That is the dangerous thing, not the globalization itself. That's something which is given. Okay, so we have to see what is our position in it. and even what is European Union's position in it. And so let's go back to the very beginnings, and okay, always the initial moment of the actual European integration is the Schuman Declaration, isn't it? And he said at the very beginning that European integration he was proposing is supposed to preserve peace in Europe. So everybody, when you say why European integration was created, everybody will say for peace, especially Germany, France, etc., etc. So that is completely true, and even as Schuman said, the world peace cannot be safeguarded without making a creative efforts proportionate to the dangers which threaten it. The contribution which an organized and living Europe can bring to civilization is indispensable to the maintenance of peaceful relations. Well, okay, when you think, even in 2012, European Union won Nobel Prize for Peace, and also the Nobel Committee says that during 60 years, European integration guaranteed the peace and assured peace on the continent. And that is perfect, although we do not feel that because we had a war and we are on the continent, but doesn't matter. Okay, maybe we are the guilty ones. Okay, and then, but the question that appears, and everybody who thinks will ask himself, okay, there were other very bloody wars before, and are only those after the Second World War intelligent enough to invent, to come to the idea that integrating and working together is, let's say, a kind of a remedy for the possibility of possible new wars. And Robert Schuman also gives indirectly the answer to that. Just the next sentence, he says, in taking upon herself for more than 20 years the role of champion of a united Europe, France has always had as her essential aim the service of peace. A united Europe was not achieved, and we had war. So he mentions something that happened 20 years before. He said for 20 years already. So what happened? It was in 1950. So what happened in 1930 or around 1930? It was the French Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Aristide Briand, who proposed on the 5th of September 1929, before the Assembly of the League of Nations, he proposed the creation of the European Federal Union within the League of Nations as a kind of a integration and organization. It did not succeed at that time, but that was a proposal. And even Briand tells us something also about his predecessors. He says, I have, in that speech, he says, I have associated myself during these last years with an active propaganda in favor of an idea which one wanted to qualify as generous, perhaps to dispense with qualifying it as imprudent. This idea, which was born many years ago, which has haunted the imagination of philosophers and poets, which has earned them what can be called success in esteem, this idea is progressed in people's minds by its own value. It ended up appearing and responding to necessity. Propagandists have come together to spread it, to bring it further into the minds of nations, and I confess that I found myself among those propagandists. He says that he belongs only to a long list of people, philosophers, poets, etc., who advocated European integration before him. And if you look back, you will see even from the Middle Ages, there is a series of projects and ideas of dozens and dozens of authors who advocated. So why European integration succeeded after the Second World War, and it did not succeed before the Second World War? Perhaps the answer is given by this gentleman, who's, let's say, the father, the spiritual father of the European integration that we have now, and it is Jean Monnet. And he said in 1943, and I will keep this picture because he said something else later, okay, the countries of Europe are too small to provide their peoples with the prosperity and social development they need. This presupposes that the states of Europe form a federation or European entity that makes a common economic unit out of them. It was in 1943 that he said. So what is important? The countries of Europe are too small to provide their peoples with the prosperity. And what do we have after in the 50s, etc.? We have 6 countries, 3 a little bit bigger, 3 smaller, that are too small, in fact, for economic needs of that period. The development of science, technology, etc., and development of economy, as a result of it, required a larger market for them, especially in comparison with their possible competitors, the United States or other big states, etc. So the reason why at least European integration succeeded, and probably one of the reasons for which it was proposed, is, besides that pacifist motivation, is the fact that it is the states became too small, owing to the development of economy, owing to the development of science, technology, which required larger and larger. This is a historical process. The feudal units became too small, and we had the states that we know now, the nation states. Then the nation states became too small, and that led in the 19th century to the creation of international organizations. And even the need for something larger, which is a state-like entity, led in the 50s to the creation of the European integration. And the European integration owes its success to the fact that it was initially, and all the time, in fact, the core of it was that economic, the common market. I went to study long ago to France, and I was a little bit surprised when I understood that they, in fact, do not use the European communities as a they say le marché commun, common market. And that is, in fact, the synonym for the, and everybody was using that instead of, yeah. Okay, so that is the core, that is the center of it. And what is happening? Look what he says a little bit before his death. He says, I have to look here because I don't see well from this distance. Monet. He says, the sovereign nations of the past can no longer solve its problem of the present. And the European community itself is only a stage to the way of to the organized world of the future. And the question is whether that future is already arriving, whether European integration is perhaps becoming too small for some processes that are, we usually do not see that. But I remember when I was at a time in France, it was 1991, I was writing my master's thesis, Mémoire de DEA, about the relations of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Is it?
Sorry, your time is over.
It's all, okay.
You will have the opportunity to write everything what you would like to in our book.
Okay, so Okay, I won't speak about the story that we had a textile agreement, we had an agreement together with a cooperation agreement, we had a textile agreement. We were a privileged part of the European Union, the big Yugoslavia. And then we had a war, our economy was ruined, etc. Even if we could lift our economy, textile production to the same level, we could not be the partner of the European Union of that kind. Why? Because the production of textile moved to the Far East. So nobody would, we are too expensive for that. And we were not in the 80s. So that is the question. And if you look at the different crises that shake Europe, at the very beginning you had a crisis before, after the failure of the European Defense Community in 1954. Then, I don't know, the empty chair crisis. So all the internal things were shaking Europe. Nowadays, you have some different crises. You have the economic crisis, which started after the world crisis, economic crisis from 2008. Then there is the migrant crisis, which is also a global phenomenon, or at least intercontinental phenomenon. Then you have the COVID crisis, pandemia, that is also something which is global. So Europe is facing global issues, even the crisis that is happening now in the energy is also something which is global. So Europe is facing things that are obviously facing. It has to cope with globalization. And if you look from outside, then we should consider what are our possibilities, what is good for us to adapt ourselves to our position that we have and that we will have for a long time. Being now we are supposed to sign a trade agreement with China for free trade. We couldn't do that if we were a member of the European Union. So that is one of the possibilities. Or we also have to think, what will the European Union do in the context of globalization? That is an important issue that is, I think, underestimated to a certain extent. Thank you. Sorry for